everyone, welcome to this week's episode of What's a Tea here at Anew. Today we're going to have a really interesting topic. We're going to talk about our rebranding. So our name is now Anew, and previously our name was South Suburban Family Shelter. For those who have been following us here at What's the Tea, we are going to be live or pre-recorded every Tuesday at 1 p.m. now. So thank you all for being here, and please continue to join us and bring your tea and just follow along with conversation. And also throughout the end of the episodes, you'll have time for questions in the comments. If we don't get to answer them during the episode, we'll definitely answer them afterwards. So since this one's pre-recorded, we'll get to your questions in the comments for sure. But I do have some very special guests here with me today. And the reason why I wanted the three of you is because you all played a very important role in this whole rebranding process. And I just want to know more, and I want to share with our people here some more interesting facts about this rebranding process. So we have Jennifer, we have Chris, and we have Esther. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'll go ahead and start so we can go in the order that you started. I'm Jennifer Gabrenia, and I am the Executive Director.
And I'm Chris Scott. I am the Development and Communications Director.
I'm Esther Jenkins. I'm a member of the board and a former president of the board.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. So let's go straight into today's topic and talk about our rebranding. So our name now is Anew. So that's a bit, different when you tell somebody you work for Anew, right? So I'm sure that's happened to all of us where we kind of stutter out amongst the name because it's definitely something new. And let's talk about that. So why did we change our name? Jennifer, you want to go ahead and start that one off?
I can start a little bit, but everybody has something to add into it. The conversation about changing our name started a long time ago. So in 2016, shortly after I joined the organization, we were in the midst of putting together a strategic plan. And actually during the pre-work of the strategic plan, there were pieces where community members were interviewed to find out kind of what they thought about the agency. And some information came out of that people were a little bit confused about the name or felt that the name didn't really fit what the agency did. So in that strategic planning process, we actually had a goal of that strategic plan to examine the brand, the mission, the name, and tagline. So that was the first time that it formally was written down that we wanted to start looking at it.
Wow, I didn't know that this conversation started back in 2016, honestly.
I think probably other staff members had been talking about it before that because it didn't, that was the sense that I always got. There were certain people, I think more public facing people that always kind of wondered whether the name was the best fit for the kind of work the agency was doing nowadays.
Yeah, I started working here in 2018 in the beginning of the year. And I had a conversation even during supervision, like, well, shouldn't the name kind of doesn't make sense? And Carrie's like, yeah, that's what we've been talking about. Anyone have anything else to add to that?
Part of the issue is that the name is a mouthful. So it took me a while to be able to say it. But I guess it didn't bother me once I figured out how to say it. But you keep getting feedback that it's confusing to other people. And it's confusing to people outside the agency, and that makes it an issue. So
it does, and the fact that it's a mouthful and it takes a little bit of time to remember can also be an issue, because even when you want to recommend the agency to somebody else and you don't exactly remember what the name is, that could be an issue too.
Yeah, I think it's been stated every way conceivable. Those 4 words have been put together any way you can put them together. Yeah.
It's true. I remember when I first started years ago, I worked for a place called Family Shelter Service. And so when I first started here, when my phone would ring from another building and I looked down on it, it said Family Shelter. And I was like, wait a minute, is my old place calling me? Like, I don't understand what's happening.
Yes, I can definitely see that. So I see these reasons amongst more reasons why, we have to change our name, but I'm sure we'll go into those as we go on during this episode. Let's talk about what the original goal was for South Suburban Family Shelter back in 1980 when it first opened. What were the services that we offered, and what was it for? What did we do?
Yeah, so we're pretty lucky that our founders kept meticulous records of all of their meetings and all of the data that they gathered. So we've actually been able to go back and read everything so that we can have a good sense of what was happening. And essentially, they formed originally as the South Suburban Shelter Task Force. And they really came together, one, to kind of figure out how big of a problem is domestic violence in our South Suburban community, but two, to build a shelter, to have an actual physical building. They wanted to buy a house to have a safe place for people to come and stay. So that's why when they incorporated later that year, they incorporated a South Suburban Family Shelter because that is what they intended to do. However, that didn't ever actually happen.
Okay.
So when I talk to people, I'm always like, we're South Suburban Family Shelter, but we don't have a shelter, at least not in the way that people imagine shelter to be. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
So the name made sense at the time that they came together.
That's what it was meant to be. It was meant to be a shelter for domestic violence victims, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we offer housing for domestic violence victims, but now we offer so much more, which is part of the reason why we have changed our name. So can we talk about, Chris, I'll let you go ahead and start off on this one, on how we came up with the new name, or what was the process?
Oh, wow. The process actually began before I started here.
Oh, okay.
Esther was president at the time, and she and Jennifer and our events and volunteer manager started out with an organization called Taproot. They went to get some free marketing advice on this particular subject, and I believe the board approved for them to move forward and embark on this process. So when I came along, we got input from every program department here, and we formed a committee, in-house committee, just getting, that way we have buy-in from the entire staff and departments. We did focus groups over the summer during the pandemic, which was, a task in itself, but we made it work. We did internal focus groups with various staff members. We also did outside focus groups with a lot of our stakeholders. We had donors, we had other agencies, we had members from the business community here, and board members also had other people sign on, for that focus group. And that was really telling. Some of the stuff was hard for us to hear when we would ask people about our names and things like this. Oh, and we also did a survey that we sent out to our entire mailing list of constituents. And the feedback that we got, some of it wasn't surprising at all. It actually reinforced what the board felt a long time ago, that the name needed to change because it did not tell the true story of what we do as an organization. So after the focus groups, the rebranding committee, we would assemble it together again, and each step as we went, we would review the data that came back from the internal focus group, the data that came back from the survey and the external focus groups. And some suggestions of names came from those surveys. A lot of them didn't stick, so to speak, but we had a lot of data to work with that helped keep us on the path, on that path that we needed to be on. And the board and Jennifer did a great job of setting the course, the most important features that helped us, guide the ship, so to speak. These are the things that we have to keep top of mind when we think of a name.
Wow, that sounds like a whole lot of research. And I like the fact that you included so many people, because that's how you get the best data, the best conclusion is when you actually include so many people and get so many responses from different people.
And we also, I neglected to say, we also looked at the feedback we got from former clients, because whenever you, especially a direct service organization, you have to tap into the people who are your clients. Those are the people that are benefited from your services, and who best to tell you if you're doing a good job or if your name actually means something to someone who's seeking out the services that we provide.
Yes. Do each of you want to talk about what your role was in this process? Because I know everybody had their own role and everybody played a very important part in this.
Well, I think my role was probably the simplest. My role was, oh, don't do that. You know, the board's not going to approve it. You know, this is how you have to word this for it to come back to the board. Okay.
So you kind of set the boundaries.
Well, that's probably a loftier way of putting it.
Okay.
That actually occurred. And part of that was some responsibility to the board, and part of that was it's a difficult task to change the name for an institution that's been around for 40 years. And it's a bittersweet kind of thing. You know, you understand why you're doing it, but at the same time, you're feeling like you're sending an old friend away, right?
Yeah.
And after a while, you're like, it wasn't that hard to say. I could have just slowed down and said it slower, you know. So it is serious business. But I was essentially just a member of the committee. I had the same input that everybody else had, although it was understood that it would be my responsibility to take it back and explain it to the board. So.
Okay.
I think, and Jennifer and I both shared the responsibility of keeping our minds together. Is this okay? Are we doing the right thing? How does this sound?
Yeah, it was, I don't know that I thought particularly what my role was. I mean, I'm in the leadership of the organization, right? So I felt an incredible amount of responsibility to the organization, everything the organization stands for, and everyone who supports the organization. I think, like Esther's saying, it was never lost on me what a huge undertaking it is, and the feelings that people attach to an organization and the name, and knowing that we had to be so careful in how we moved forward with examining it. And part of what I kept putting out there is, you know, we had a couple different ways that we could go. You know, do we do a little bit of a change? Do we do a really big change? And what's that going to look like? But I think Chris and I both had to keep reminding ourselves that, like, it's going to be what it's going to be. You know? And I think at certain points we would get attached to something that we really liked, and then we would have to remind everyone, like, don't get attached to anything. Like, you know, we're not doing this for us personally, right? We're doing this for what's best for the organization, what's going to move the organization forward, what ultimately is best going to benefit anyone who comes and gets services here. So I was really trying to keep that big picture. That's usually my role. Like, I'm the big picture person, trying to keep that in focus and communicate that as we went through the process. And I think another piece was figuring out the pace along the way. So when we started off with this, it was before the pandemic. So we thought we were going to wrap it up in like 6 months or something. Mm-hmm. We had this idea of what we were going to do quickly. And then the pandemic happened, and we kind of put it on the shelf for a little bit and had to go back around and say, okay, can we move forward on this? And at one point decided that we were no longer going to give ourselves a deadline, that we were just going to go through the process the way that we felt like we needed to, and that was going to give us the best chance to really weigh all of the information, because we wanted to make sure that we did the best we could with the process, because, like Esther's saying, because of the weight of what we were doing.
Yeah, that honestly sounds really difficult. And now I can see why you all weren't sharing with us the name, like the possible names, because everybody's anxiously waiting. What is it going to be? What are the options?
Well, you saw some of the options in the surveys. You know,
Yeah.
We did make sure that our staff was on the list of surveys that we sent out. So there were some, but the options, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many types of names we looked at. We didn't keep a list of the number, but there was a lot. We looked at a lot of different possibilities. And then there was the idea of a name and the idea of a tagline, and how do those need to be different, and how do they need to work together? And
Well, I
Yeah,
think you all
it
did a
was
really
hard.
good job because once I did hear of, what the name is, I feel like the name and the tagline just go along so well. Anew, building beyond violence and abuse. And I even realized when I translated it in Spanish, it sounds beautiful in Spanish. I don't know if that's something you all have been told
Oh,
yet,
can you say it?
but I like saying it out loud. It just, Anew, construyendo más allá del abuso y la violencia. So I don't know. I just like how it sounds. I like how it sounds. It really means it translates exactly the same. There's some things that you kind of translate and it doesn't really make sense. This one does. And it sounds beautiful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but I feel like any type of change can be difficult, just because we get so used to one thing and it becomes comfortable for us. But
Mhm.
in the back of our minds, we knew the name had to change because a lot of people were getting confused.
Mhm.
And I think that definitely it was the right decision. I think a lot of people feel that way.
That's good to hear.
Mhm.
That's good to hear.
I did want to ask about, oh, go ahead, Esther.
No, I was going to say the bottom line is that a lot of effort went into it. I think people need to understand that, and that it
Yes.
was very difficult. It was not an easy process. So,
And speaking of that, I wanted to ask about any of the feedback that you all got. Did you have any negative feedback? Was it mostly positive? And then how did you deal with that?
You mean once we've done the launch, since we've done
Yes,
the
once the name changed.
Oh. Yeah, I haven't received any negative feedback. I don't know if that means somebody's thinking it and just not saying it, but of the feedback that we have received, it's actually all been positive. Even from a few folks that were a little hesitant and not sure that this was something that we ought to take on. Like the feedback that we've received for the most part has been, it's really nice. A lot of feedback on the logo itself, that it looks fresh and bright. It's all been positive, which is really nice because I had said to the development communication teams, like, do y'all feel like we've collectively birthed a new child here? And I just need people to tell me it's beautiful.
to lie to me and tell me it's beautiful.
Right?
You always tell people their baby is beautiful. Tell me it's
Right.
You do.
Tell me it's beautiful.
Right, right.
But we have, right? Chris has gotten to see some of that
Yeah.
feedback directly, and even a couple of phone calls, I think.
Yeah, we like Jennifer said, we've been getting so many positive feedback. We actually had a donor call us and say, hey, I love the name, but I want to make sure that my donations stay in place. I don't want any confusion with the bank and anything. And I thought that was a really big compliment, because she also wanted to continue to send out the link to a lot of her friends to continue to support us. And all the positive feedback has just been great. It's reassuring to everyone that was involved that, yes, we took our time, we knew the assignment, and then we accomplished it. And we have a great product now.
Yes,
Well,
and all your hard work
glad
is
to
paying
hear
off.
that. I'm sorry, but I'm really glad to hear that because I haven't gotten any feedback at all.
I will put
or
together
negative.
an email, Esther, since we're all together. Can we do that, Chris? Do you think we can
Yes.
compile some of the things that we've gotten, and that way I can send that out to the board? Because you're right,
Yes.
Esther, it would be really good.
Yeah, and I figured it was just maybe too early, that it just got out there and many people just hadn't seen it, but I'm not getting anything positive or negative. So that would be really good. That would be very helpful.
Yeah,
We
we'll
need
definitely share
reassuring.
that. Mhm.
Dude, don't you need someone to tell you? I really like it. It's great.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I have had
Yes.
people even, some of it's trickling in a little late, but a lot of congratulations, which I guess I don't know why I didn't anticipate that, but that feels nice. Congratulations on your brand. It looks
Okay.
really fresh. A lot of people really love the logo. So
That's
yeah.
helpful. Yeah, that's
And I
very
do know, I have some colleagues similarly situated at agencies that have had the same name for 30, 40 years. And even when they knew we were going through the rebranding process, they would say things like, I'd love to be able to do that, but I don't think my board will ever want to do that. So
right. Very good. Well, I think it may be helpful that, it's not that unusual now for agencies to change their name. I mean, at one point it would have been earth shattering.
I think so.
Change the name.
Yes.
So that's helpful too. But I'm looking forward to seeing, because it carries a lot of risk with it. So
It does. I think that's the other reason why we decided to just not give ourselves any kind of deadline, just to make sure that we were doing our due diligence. You know, did
Right.
we share it with everyone that we should share it with? Did we get feedback from everyone that we ought to be getting feedback from? Did we consider that feedback carefully enough?
well, I think at the beginning, I recall us saying that the process was almost more important than the outcome in terms of the name, that everybody felt as though they had been heard. And I think that happened. So that's good.
How so is it that process is more important than the outcome? I think that confused me just a little bit.
The process meaning, who you get feedback from in the initial stages around, do you need a change? What should it look like? What's your response to what we have? What's your response to the whole thing around people feeling as though they've been heard? And
Yeah.
and for those who weren't heard, that is, there would be no reason for them to give feedback. They can see that it was a process that had people involved. So
Exactly.
I think that's important.
Definitely. So let's talk about how we decided on Anew, building beyond violence and abuse. How did we come up with this name? We've been talking a lot about how our name is now Anew, but why Anew? What does that symbolize?
So we'd have to go back. Let's all try to brainstorm.
I completely forgot it.
We started off with some suggestions from people. We kind of just had like a couple of different buckets of names. Like there were just different meetings where there were a couple of different buckets. We got clear on what was problematic with the current name. So that was one of the things that we had to do. So one of the things is we were often confused with any other agency that had South Suburban as the start of its name. So we had a lot of discussion around like, should location be part of the name? So we had to get clear on the elements that may or may not be necessary. And then just like brainstorm lists. And we did a lot of things on Zoom and learning how to pull down the whiteboard and type in different names. I think some of us then started, when we thought about concepts, we would go to the dictionary. I know I did that a lot. What does this word mean? What is it if I look it up in the thesaurus? And we thought about, what if we did a name in a foreign language? Like, how would that go with people?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we just did a lot of brainstorming, and then a lot of discussion around how people felt and reacted until we got down to, I think the first survey, did it have 4 names in it, maybe? Does that sound right?
I
Yeah.
want to say it was either 4 or 3.
Yeah,
probably.
so we said, let's try these out. These all feel like something we want to test. And so we sent those around to people and got our feedback from that. And I think some things in there stayed, some things when I know at one point we decided we still needed more options. We didn't have enough options that felt good. So then there was everybody bring, 1 or 2 new options, and we would go out as committee members and then the same thing was happening sort of side by side with the tagline.
Yeah.
So there was like similar process, but the same thing with the tagline where we would put some options out there, see what people thought about it. And at the same time, figuring out like, did our survey make sense? Do we need to change the way that we did the survey? So it was just a lot of back and forth until we got down to the 2 names that we ultimately put out as the options and the 2 taglines that were very similar to each other. I think by the end that everybody felt really good about it. And we did, I need to mention, we had a volunteer that came in and helped us, that has like a marketing background as her expertise, Jennifer Quirk, who is local. She volunteered on the committee with us, and she really helped us a lot to stay focused, because this was the point where some of us had certain names and things that we really liked. And it was kind of hard to let those go. So she really helped us like understand, like, how many times should you really go back on something? Like, when do you need to look at your data and realize it's time to let an option go, you know? So that was a really interesting process too, because we kind of got to the point where I think we could have been coming up with possible names for a whole other year if we really wanted to. So we also had to say, okay, when have we gotten enough in, and put the final options out there.
That's true. I'm just imagining it as you speak. And it does sound like a really difficult process for all these people to agree on one name. It's like if you're having, I imagine it this way, if you're having a kid and you need you and your husband and your mom and grandparents and all aunts and uncles to agree on that kid's name.
No, the
It'll never
interesting
happen.
thing, we weren't just looking for a name that people could agree on. You know, I kept talking about, well, is there passion for the name? You know?
Right, right.
True.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to agree on it without the passion.
Yeah.
There was this whole piece that we were looking about that we learned, right, with branding, that was newer for us, was that your brand should evoke some kind of feeling for people when they look at it and hear it. And so for us, difficult things to hear. To what Chris had said, that was one of the things we did in our early surveys, is we put out the name and then we put out the logo that was SSFS at the time. And how does the logo make you feel? And we were like, oh, it didn't make people feel good or anything at all. Like it was just sort of bland. And it was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then we were aware that we didn't want that to be what people thought about whatever the new thing was that we came up with. So we also learned that rebranding isn't necessarily magical, that there isn't necessarily going to be a time where the clouds part and the rays of sunshine come in and everyone sits around the table and goes, oh, this is it. You know? And so at some point I think when we came into it, that's what we were expecting. Like there would be this magical moment. And so I was glad that we had someone who was consulting with us on a pro bono basis, because she said, that's actually not really what ever happens.
This is sausage being made here.
She was able to give us that reality check that was helpful.
What you're waiting on is not going to get here.
Right.
It's kind of like all those stories about Prince Charming, and we're all like, that's not how it works, folks.
Not reality. I agree. I think that the name Anew brings some kind of emotion. And that's kind of how I felt when I first heard it. And it makes you think of, it's kind of broad. So it makes you think of so many different things is the way I look at it. It makes me think of my program as prevention, and even the abuser intervention program where you're intervening. And it kind of encompasses everything instead of just South Suburban Family Shelter, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that word Anew. Like, where did that word come from? What does it symbolize? What does it represent?
So it came from very much what you're saying. Other people jump in because I don't want to be the only one talking, but I'll probably just take off. Hopefully Esther can get back in with us. We wanted to accomplish what you pretty much had just said, Celeste, is that we all were aware that our agency was so multifaceted and dynamic, and our experiences that most people didn't know that. So we wanted to have a name that could encompass everything that we do. We also really wanted to have a name and a tagline that could set our vision out in the public. We really wanted people to not only have a better sense of how broad our work was, but where we were going. So the tagline actually is just as important as the name. And when it came down to changing the name on a legal basis. They're actually, the name and the tagline combo is our actual legal name. Because there was an Anew company that, so we had to put them both together. So on our legal documents, like it's all there together. And I really like seeing it that way, because I think it just helps set that vision for us. Is what do we want to accomplish? What is the point, right? What are we doing here? And where do we want to go?
Definitely. Anything you would like to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jennifer said. That's what we wanted. And one thing that I love about the name, it gives you a vision without us saying what our vision is. All the programs that we have, our ultimate goal is to end the cycle of domestic violence. And that title gives you that. It's like we're giving individuals and communities the ability to build beyond teaching about healthy relationships, going out into the community, educating the community about different forms of domestic violence, how to have a healthy community, and I just love the title, and I love the tagline along with it, because even coming from a fundraising point of view, one of the things I kind of mourned with our previous name, the word shelter, we always talk about words that grab you, and of course, shelter is something that individuals think about and it springs them into action. But I'm so proud of this new name, because building beyond violence and abuse, that grabs you. It makes you like, okay, yes, I'm tackling an issue right now, but I'm also working towards the end result of what I wanted to see. And so it's just our vision statement all in one sentence to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And with one of the things that Esther actually kept bringing up in all of our meetings was this. We talked a lot about the concept of people sort of starting over again or getting a second chance, or at our agency, we talk a lot about how change is possible. So like transformation. And so we really did a lot of discussing about like what words sort of encompass that idea, and going back around on that. So that was one of the thoughts behind kind of looking for a word like Anew that would help sort of get that concept across, but also feel good to say. Like it was just interesting. I can't remember all the things, but there were certain words where we were like, that sounds weird, even though it gets to what we want to get to. So there was a lot of thought into what does someone experience when they come to our agency and they work with our agency? What's it like when they're starting? And so that was our Sanctuary Transitional Housing Program has an alumni group. So we went back to them a couple of times and put out those ideas so that we could get feedback from them and a couple of folks in our partner abuse intervention program, because we also knew we needed a name that someone was going to call us, and not look at the name and be like, I'm not going to call that place.
No, that makes sense
Because
though.
people have choices about where they get their services from, to be honest. So there were a lot of different things that went into trying to land on a name that really fit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did want to ask before we go into, I also want to talk about like how the logo came about, what the colors represent and all that. But I wanted to ask if anybody here had any type of experience where before the name change, before the rebranding, when we were still South Suburban Family Shelter, any type of situation where somebody was confused, or you just it kind of clicked to you like, yeah, we need to change the name.
Here being at the administrative office, we all have experienced firsthand with people who come to the door expecting us to be a shelter where they can sign in for the day. And it was just heartbreaking when you would have to tell them, no, I'm sorry, we're a domestic violence agency. We are still able to help them with our partner organizations, refer them to them. But it was just heartbreaking to look on their face to, well, but you're saying you're South Suburban Family Shelter. Even where our donors are concerned, sometimes the items that they would bring to the door, they believed that we were an on-site shelter, bringing clothes, bringing, food that's ready to eat. On our wish list, we like non-perishable items. And then even the phone calls, we have to firsthand ask, is this a domestic violence situation? And then have to go into the whole explanation. So that was very sobering to say, yes, this name needs to change because we don't want to mislead the community. And that's what came out in the focus groups as well.
Yeah, I can definitely relate with all these phone calls. We definitely needed to have resources for shelters at hand all the time because people were calling looking for shelters. And so, we have to give them a whole different number. Of course, give them what they need, but we don't provide it. So send them in the right direction. But I had a lot of instances where I was at a resource fair and a lot of people walked up to my table. Of course, pre-pandemic, we went to a lot of resource fairs and, they walked up to the table thinking I was a shelter, representing a shelter, until I started speaking to them about the services. And a lot of people were just surprised.
Yeah, I've gotten that talking to prospective board members and some donors when we start sharing what our agency does, a lot of surprise and shock and, oh, wow, I had no idea that you did everything that you do. And I always thought it was important that people know that because the image that people always had was emergency shelter in particular. And our emergency shelter operates very differently than an on-site shelter. So the number of people that we serve in that program is actually very low because we try to get people into an on-site program at a sister agency for the most part. So people would have the vision that our agency was this whole piece that's actually very small, and they would just miss so much of the work that we do that's community-based. People would say, I had no idea that you do that.
So we've got the logo pulled up here now. And I did want to ask you all about this logo and how it is that we designed this. What does it represent? What do the colors mean? Whatever it is you can share with us.
Okay, so what's fun about the logo to me is that the committee very early on, and probably one of our first couple of meetings, talked about wanting the logo to represent some kind of idea of breaking the cycle. And so we didn't talk, we just talked about it early on and everyone was like, yes, of course, that makes sense. And then we just focused on the name from that point forward. So that's the idea behind the graphic when we worked with a fabulous graphic designer, Lisa Moraldi, and we said, here's what our committee has been talking about, right, Chris?
Yes. Yeah, it was great. Lisa was great.
Yeah,
Nice.
so you have to have a person that you can pour your ideas into, and then they know how to make those come up visually. So that's the idea, is that it's an incomplete circle and it's being interrupted. It's meant to represent breaking the cycle.
Awesome. Yes, it's definitely reminds me of the presentations where we do all the time, where we have the cycle in a circle, and we discuss breaking the cycle and what we can do to stop that. So that made a lot of sense to me. Let's also talk about these color choices, because I agree. I think they're very vibrant. I like how it's two different colors. It kind of, it's just more appealing to the eye, I feel like. Mm-hmm. So what do these colors stand for?
Well, purple obviously is domestic violence awareness color. So we always intended we wanted to keep purple as a primary color in the palette. And then I think to exactly what you just said, and Chris, you'll have to refresh my memory. I think we just wanted to try to add another color in just for that contrast. just to kind of have it be something that felt like a little bit more active
Mhm.
and a little bit more engaging.
Yeah, and Blue also, or Rachel on our team, she looked up that, and blue symbolizes wisdom in the depth of understanding. So with that combined, we hope that it inspires wisdom and understanding that's needed, to end the cycle of domestic violence.
Nice. Okay, Chris, if you want to go ahead and stop sharing, I just want to talk about one more thing here. I want to talk about what all these changes, what does it mean for those that we help? Has anything else changed? Are our services still the same? Just to make that clear to everyone who is listening.
Well,
Whoever wants to take this one on.
our services are still the same. Our mission is still the same. I think what's great about this rebranding, it really just captures everything that the organization does. That's that light bulb that went off in the focus groups and the survey and the things that we got back. When people realized all of the programmatic services that we provide, they were like, oh my gosh, you guys are more amazing than I thought, So that's the really good thing that has come out of rebranding. And we're just really excited about it. People are seeing how partnerships with us and the existing partnerships that we have, how that's really enriching the community. And it's just awesome. So Jennifer, I know you probably have more to add to that.
I don't really. Everything is, we haven't changed who we are as an organization. Really the motivation was to just better represent who we are, and all that we aspire to be to the community.
Great. If anyone has any last words, anybody has anything they want to say to the viewers or anything at all before we sum it up? No? Okay.
That's it.
That we hope they enjoy the new name and all that it represents. And
Definitely.
we look forward to just moving on.
Mhm.
So I do want to thank you all for being here. I definitely want to thank our watchers for being here with us. And if you we are definitely open for any comments. What do you think about this new name? How does it make you feel? Whatever your thoughts are, go ahead and post in the comments. We want to hear what it is. I'd be interested in reading those. And also, if you have any questions, we'll for sure get those answered from you. All right, everyone. So thank you all for being here and goodbye. Feel free to tune in every Tuesday at 1 p.m. for What's a Tea here at Anew. Same time, same place, different tea. I'm sorry?
When will this one air?
Tomorrow. So it's going to air. So we're recording today on a Monday, but it's going to air on the 14th at 1 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you guys
Celeste.
later.
Bye.
See you next week.
All right.